Thanks to those of you that enrolled for being here, and I see a few guests as well. So thank you for coming. Today we have a presentation about the Rosa Southeast Greenway, and Thea Hensel is the founding member, or one of the founding members of the Rosa Southeast Greenway campaign. She's been co-chair of that campaign for the last 9 years. In addition to that, she is a 2000 fellow of the Leadership Institute for Ecology and Economy. That's actually one of the places I got to meet and get to know Thea better because I'm both fellows of the 2011 Leadership Institute. She's been a board member of the Sonoma County Forum. She works on the grant committee for the Impact 100 and also resides in the co-housing committee for the past 11 years, which actually brings you close to the Southeast Greenway. But before retiring, she had a long sales career with Wrangler Jeans Company. She's taught school for 5 years. She was also an employment recruiter in the biotech industry. So with that, she also has a BS from the State University of New York, and I can't pronounce that. Oneonta, thank you. And a master's in education from NYU, also an HR certificate from our very own SRDC. So please welcome Thea Hensel.
Thanks everybody for coming. I assume some of you came to get in out of the rain, but the rest of you are here because hopefully you're interested in the Greenway project. Just to tell you a little bit about it, it is a group of all volunteers. We have approximately 25 people who are in our core group, and we meet monthly just to make decisions, to keep everybody abreast of what's going on. We have a smaller group of about 6 people that we call the strategy team. And that's composed of a group of people who really know a little bit about the inner workings of how to make this thing happen. And this thing is actually taking vacant land and doing something with it. And it's a little bit complicated because frequently, sometimes vacant land is within a city limit, and it's easy to turn it into housing or a park or something else somebody else might want to do with it. This gets complicated because it's owned by Caltrans, which is a state agency. So our core group, as I mentioned, meets once a month. We have a group of people that we call advisors, who I can talk a little bit more about later, but there are we call them our specialists that they're on reserve, emergency call for us when we need something. And then we have over 2,000 supporters, and that's something that I would like to encourage you to become. And one of the ways you can do it is just by signing your email address, and we'll put you into our system. And we don't do lots of spam. We don't really try to get people flooded with emails because we know people don't read their emails anymore, but we just sort of try to do it when we need something. So basically the pictures that you're seeing here in the photographs are on the Greenway. It doesn't always look as pretty as this, I have to admit. There's a lot of it that's surrounded by a chain link fence. At Christmas time, people throw their old dead Christmas trees there. There are lots of old mattresses and things that periodically need to get cleaned up. And we don't think it should look like that. We think it should look like this. Right now, because of all this rain, it looks like this a lot, which is just this beautiful emerald green stretch of property. And that's what you're seeing right here. Down at the bottom of Farmers Lane, if any of you are, how many of you are Santa Rosa residents? Okay, you know that Highway 12 just dead ends at Farmers Lane. And when you stop at that light, there's a Valero gas station on the right. There's a big mound of dirt right in front of you. That's the beginning of this Greenway, which is down here on the bottom. Just to orient yourselves a little bit more, that bright red star that you see is Montgomery High. And if you look at it, the field and the tennis courts are right next to the beginning of the Greenway. Franquette, Yulupa, and Summerfield are all roads that cross it. And then up at the top, it ends at the campgrounds up at Spring Lake Park. And so it's over 2 miles long. It's 57 acres, which is a pretty big piece of property. It's over 300 feet wide in most areas. There's one little pinch point up at the top closer to Spring Lake that's quite narrow. And what happened was this was supposed to be a freeway. And Highway 12 was supposed to continue because originally there was a plan to build about 6,000 to 8,000 homes between the town of Sonoma and Santa Rosa. That was something that was decided after the war when building was really going crazy. And through the years, that never happened. So as we look at this land, there are some important elements to it. Down on the lower right, you see one creek. There are 3 on the property, which makes it really an important piece of property. On something that's only 2 miles long, to have 3 creeks on it is pretty important. And right now, you can imagine they're just looking amazing. You could kayak on them. Excuse me. On the upper left-hand corner, you see walnut trees, and that is actually a heritage grove that's been there for over 100 years. This property used to be outside of Santa Rosa city limits, and it was mostly prune, apricot, and walnut trees. And farmers owned this land, and it was also surrounded by housing. And Caltrans bought the property from the farmers, and they also bought people's houses. They bought about 50 houses in the 1950s when they were doing this, and had this idea. We also think it's one of the things that's so nice about this property is it has almost unobstructed views of the surrounding mountains. And we're pretty lucky to live where we do because we've got beautiful vistas almost anywhere we go in the city and the county. So just to tell you a little bit about this history of the land, it was, as I said, mostly orchards. There were a few structures, barns. Some roads were mostly just for farm implements, tractors, trucks, things like that. In '59, Caltrans and the city decided on that route over to Sonoma. Unbeknownst to Caltrans and a miscommunication with the water agency built Spring Lake Park, which for those of you that don't know it, it's a reservoir. It's not really a natural lake. So in the 60s and the 70s, as Caltrans extended 12 from 101, pushing eastward, that land became very valuable as a right-of-way property. In '74, Spring Lake Park opened because the water agency had bought up all that land. And at the same time, an amazing benefactor for Santa Rosa, a man by the name of Henry Trioni, owned lots of acreage over on the other side that he decided he wanted to donate to the state. That property we now know as Annandale Park. And it's amazing to think that we have that beautiful resource here in the area, and it was just by one man feeling generous and giving it to us. So at the same time, Caltrans designed this beautiful bridge to go over this lake. Now, for those of you who have walked or cycled around Spring Lake or been to Annandale, you can just imagine what it would be like to be walking or jogging around Spring Lake with cars going over your head. And so what happened was in the 80s, a group of citizens said, no, we're not going to do a bridge over Spring Lake. They actually had t-shirts made, they went to City Hall all the time, they had 700 signatures on a petition, which at that point in time was a whole lot because we didn't have social media to collect petitions just with a press of a button. They actually had to go door to door and get all those signatures. In the 1970s, it was actually 1975, the city council, led by a woman who was then on the city council by the name of Doreen Evans, said, why do we have this piece of property in our general plan? It has no zoning. It's not anything we can do something with. But they voted to take it out of the city general plan. And for those of you that don't know, it's a guiding document that the city of Santa Rosa uses to determine what land uses are going to be. So if you want to build a single-family house on something, you have to find out what the zoning is for that area. And so they took it out of this general plan, and then it became just a big white blob on the map. We decided in 2009 that that property had been sitting there fallow for over 50 years, and it just seemed like the public should have a right to use that for something. We didn't know what, but we said, let's find out what people would like to do with the property and move forward. So that's how the campaign started. There were just 6 of us in a room one day saying, how can we make this happen? And that was sort of the seed for our forming this group. In 2011, unbeknownst to the campaign committee, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Group, which is one of the city boards and commissions, put a Class 1 bike lane on that property. We didn't advocate for it. We were surprised when we found out that that had happened, but we were really happy because that gave us more entree into not making it a road, making it suitable for citizens of Santa Rosa to use. And just so that you know, the city has lots of boards and commissions. They're always looking for people who are interested in joining one of those boards and commissions. If you go on the city website, there are places where you can apply for it, and there are just all kinds of interesting things. So if you feel like you want a voice in what's happening, that's a good way to plug in early. So of all the things, as we went to house meetings and we gave Rotary meetings and we went to churches and anybody who would listen to us, the question was, what do you want? So time and time again, people said, we want open space, we want a bicycle and pedestrian pathway, we want community gardens, we want a place for people to gather. And so it became obvious to us that we were shaping an idea for a greenway. Fortunately for us, one of the people who worked for the city said, you know, there's a group who has a national program, and it's sponsored by the National Association of Architects, and they travel around to different cities, and they can look at this and do a design for you. So we applied for a grant. We were very lucky. We were one of 9 cities in the country to receive that grant. And here you see some of the fruits of that labor. There were big community gatherings. The book, that cover that you see there, I have a copy of right here, if any of you are interested in looking at it later. This gave us a concept plan to move forward with. They came to town, they studied the area, they had big town hall meetings. Sometimes there were 300 people attending these, all giving input. One of the curious things is they said to the local neighborhood people who lived in there, they had a special focus group for them, and they said, where do people meet other neighbors and see each other in the neighborhood? Where's the hanging out spot? And people said, Whole Foods. And they said, you know, a grocery store is not really a great hanging out place. There's something else that needs to happen in this neighborhood. And so that began, again, this conversation about what do people want to see on this property. And this is what makes this a real grassroots project. It started in people's living rooms with people's ideas. I used to hand out a slip of paper and say, write on one side what you want to see on the property, and on the other side, write what you don't want to see on the property. And that was a very early, simple way to start getting communications. We've gotten feedback in much more sophisticated ways since then, but it all sort of really points to this same direction of restoration, open space, places for people to congregate, places for people to do active and passive recreation. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So this is going to be an urban linear park. It's going to be in the city, it's long and skinny, and that means it's got access in lots of different places. So it gives us many opportunities. And here again is what people said they wanted. And I put it in the order in which people said they wanted those things. So again, the most popular things are bicycle and pedestrian trails and open space, restoration, get rid of the invasive weeds, plant natives in there. Gathering spots, definitely. One of the ways you keep a park safe is having it used all the time. And so that's one of the things that we want to encourage in this planning process. There are many people who live around the Greenway who live in apartments. And we did surveys, knocked on people's doors, and then we went to 2 local food banks and talked to the people waiting in line. And we said, if we had community gardens in this land, would this be something that you would be interested in? Got a lot of feedback positively on that. So that's one of the things that we're really encouraging in this design. There are 7 schools that are very close by this property. 1 high school, 1 middle school, and a bunch of elementary schools. We've developed relationships with all these people, and what we think would be a wonderful thing to happen is for the kids to be able to walk to the property, and whether it's having their own gardens or cleaning up the creeks or learning about the wildlife that's living in the creeks, we think it's a great outdoor classroom for kids, and the principals and the school districts are excited about that as well. So when the bicycle and pedestrian pathways are designed, we are going to advocate for 2. And that means we probably have to raise twice as much money to build them, but we think it's important. If you've ever been a cyclist yourself or a jogger, you know that cyclists and walkers and joggers don't always really get along. And so we think it's really good to have 2 separate pathways so that kids who are on little tricycles or moms pushing strollers or people who just want to walk don't have bicycles saying on your left, whizzing by them. And if you've got earbuds in and you can't hear them, it creates conflict. So we really think the best design is 2 pathways with some sort of a buffer in between them. They can be separated by land or perhaps just some greenery growing in between it, but designating it is important. And this is also going to be an important new entrance into Spring Lake Park. How many of you have ever entered through Nuanga on the west side of Spring Lake? It's a very narrow street. It has ditches on both sides. It has no sidewalks. And it's also the main entrance if you've got a boat on a trailer putting it in at Spring Lake. So it's not a great place for cyclists and walkers to enter the park. We would like to get them off Nuanga and moved into this new entrance to the park. Because of climate change and because there is a great need for carbon sequestration and all of the things involved in having clean water, clean air, etc., this can be a real good opportunity to plant more trees. It is critical that these be natives. It used to be an oak woodland and an oak woodland savanna. We would like to return it to that. So because every year Caltrans comes with a disking machine and they turn it all over into these big clods of dirt, it really germinates the invasive weed seeds. We would like to get rid of those and replace them with natives. The more natives we can plant, the less maintenance it needs, because it's not something that needs to be cared for once it's established. We think too that restoring the creeks is very important. Daylighting creeks is good. One of these creeks, the Sierra Spring Creek, actually winds up in Doyle Park, and believe it or not, they have seen coho salmon in that creek down by that park. So who's to know whether salmon could actually travel up this far, but it's an interesting and exciting thought. There's wildlife moving through this area right now. There's a coyote that lives up just above Summerfield. We see him traveling around all the time. A fox was sighted right near Montgomery High School a couple weeks ago. There are, of course, the deer and the wild turkey that goes without saying. They seem to be everywhere. But one of the things that people don't think about very often when you're talking about wildlife corridors is what we call the birds, the bees, and the butterflies. Those little things that need wildlife corridors and the proper vegetation as well. So this, again, will enhance that opportunity. The scenic vistas are amazing. If you just, every once in a while when you're driving around, pick your head up and look at what surrounds us in the area. We have a beautiful, majestic mountain vista surrounding us all the time. And we think it's important to keep that. One of the things that we're a little bit, we don't know the right answer for this, but when Caltrans or a utility company do think that something that's a little bit destructive, like widening a freeway, for example, they're taking habitat. They have to find a balance somewhere else to correct that, and it's called mitigation. And so frequently, organizations are looking for mitigation sites. And what that means is if you take away trees or creek areas in one place, you have to develop it and preserve it in another. So this land, because it is 57 acres, might have the opportunity to provide some mitigation areas. That's something that we are exploring with Caltrans right now, and perhaps one of the utility companies as well. Why do we want to do this? Well, we think that when you live in an urban area, and as the council and the city council and the county are talking about the housing crisis that we have here, we are going to be building more and more units of housing, apartments and homes for people to live in. It's going to become more of a concentrated area because we want to build up, not out, and create urban sprawl. One of the things that people need then to enhance their quality of life is a nice place to go. Having an urban outdoor area right outside your door is a lot nicer, and it sort of is in tandem with those beautiful parks that we have to get in our car and go to. So we think community gardens will be great for the people who live in the neighborhood. They say that it's most effective for people who live within a quarter of a mile of a community garden to use, because you don't want people to get in their cars and go water their vegetables or harvest. Having active and passive recreation is interesting because people always think that that part of town has lots and lots of parks in it. But when you look at the aerial map, the green spaces that you see on the map are playgrounds next to schools. And the closest parks for that particular area is Doyle Park on one end and Howard Park on the other, which are not exactly parks that you just would walk to early in the day, or if you only have a short period of time. So we think it's also important, if any of you have tried to reserve picnic areas in Howard Park. In the summertime, there's always a long waiting list for that. We think that that would alleviate some of that impact. It's going to be important for people to be able to concentrate there and do active recreation as well. Could be park courses, could be lots of things, we don't know. This area has been divided north and south. We think it's going to help community connections, have areas where people can actually gather and do something. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of connecting the neighborhood. The solid red line you see is that Class 1 bike lane that I talked about before. The dotted lines are all Class 2 bike lines. If you've ever ridden a bike on Mendocino or Sonoma or Hohen or any of those cross streets, it's having a bike lane on a road. So it's Class 2 means bicycles and cars are sharing the road together. And so Class 1 bike lanes really encourage people to get on their bikes who are a little bit timid of riding their bikes in traffic. So the more Class 1s that we can have interspersed with Class 2s, the better off we are. This crazy map makes you a little bit dizzy, but it's an interesting concept. Have any of you ever heard of the Bay Trail? This is a concept where each community is building trails that eventually will be a huge trail that goes all around San Francisco Bay, all the way from Vallejo down to San Jose, from Hayward over to San Mateo. What this is here is a network of trails that will be small little feeder trails that will feed into that one big trail. And the way to get people out walking, riding their bikes, is having good trails. So this is a plan that's in existence right now for trails. Some of them have, the solid lines have already been built. The dotted lines are in the planning process. And so we think it's really important for the Greenway, that one little piece in there of a dotted line, to be part of this bigger network. Over there you see the part of the Greenway that is heading to Spring Lake. The next one you see is heading over through the park to Melita Road. And if any of you live over on that side of town, there's also another entrance to Spring Lake Park over there. But Sonoma Regional Parks has just done a study of a bicycle lane that will go from Santa Rosa all the way to Sonoma. And for cyclists, this is going to be really important because there are so many wineries over on Highway 12 in that section that there have been some terrible catastrophes that have happened on that road with cyclists, and so they really are encouraging getting a safer way to travel. There are also on that part of town some schools there, and kids are walking on Highway 12, and it's not safe. So that's an important trail that will get built. This is the section that's going to bring us closer to downtown, and when the next Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Board gets together in 2 years and revises their plan, the hope is that they will make Vallejo Street a Class 2 bike lane, because the only choice right now to get downtown is Sonoma, and that has a lot of traffic on it. So if that can be moved over to Vallejo, once again, it'll be a lot safer. This link takes you over to the other side of town and under the freeway. This will be done right down by City Hall, by the Joe Rodota Trail. Takes you all the way out to Sebastopol. And it also is going to be linking you to the SMART train. So one of the things about the SMART train development is there is a design plan to have a bicycle pathway that runs parallel to it. So once again, all of these trails are linking each other in safer ways to get around. And I don't know if you know, but you will be able to take a bicycle on SMART too. So that's going to be another advantage. We as a group decided a long time ago that this was way beyond our pay grade, that we really did not have the expertise and the clout to make this thing happen by ourselves. And so we formed a partnership. And the way we did that is we had been meeting with people and saying, we have this idea, we'd like to do this, how can we make this happen? And just sort of pick everybody's brain. Well, we invited all 25 of those people to a room together, and we said, okay, all of you have to step up and tell us how we're going to do this. And they all sort of went, okay, he's going to do it, she's going to do it. No, we're not going to do it. And ultimately, out of that, we came up with this partnership of strong leaders in the community. The water agency is a county agency, as well as regional parks. They will be partners together in the link between Summerfield and the park entrance. The city will own what I call the flatlands, from Farmers Lane to Summerfield. And that will be managed by us, probably because we'll become a Friends of the Greenway or something like that, managing volunteers. LandPass, if any of you know LandPass, anybody is familiar with LandPass? They are an incredible organization that runs Bear Farm down in Roseland. They have different lands all over the county, and they run amazing outdoor and educational programs. So they will be a partner. And then Sonoma Land Trust came on a little bit later, and they are wonderful at getting properties and preserving them. And so they're helping us with the negotiations, with the appraisal, with the title searches, and all of the things that are involved in buying a piece of property. So that happened in 2013 with a letter of intent, and all that means is it said, we're on board, we're going to do this together, and I'll do this part and you do that part. But it gave us something to send to Caltrans. It was already approved by the city, and they knew that we were a viable organization at that point in time. And then in 14, we got lucky. Caltrans was doing a study of Highway 12, and the city wrote and said, we don't want a road here, and Caltrans said, we don't want a road here. So the California Highway Patrol said, okay, we're going to pull this out of the highway plan, and that gave Caltrans an opportunity to stick a for sale sign on this property. And before we had conversations with them, that gave us the opportunity to sort of have a relationship with them already. And so we said, no, don't put a for sale sign on it, we want it. So we developed what's called a memorandum of understanding. And this gives us first right of refusal. In other words, they can't sell it out to somebody else. They can't break the property up into little bits and pieces and sell the good stuff off. And they also are giving us 5 years to make this happen. And we're about a year and a half into this program right now. At the same time that was happening, the city spent 9 months doing a study. It's on the city website. It's called Santa Rosa Greenway Southeast Greenway, the conditions, constraints, and opportunities of this property. And it's exactly what it is. The city planner and a botanist, a biologist went out on the property. They spent all day there studying it. They came back and wrote a report. And it talks about the good, the bad, and the ugly of this property. What are the challenges that we're facing? What are the attributes to it? And it, again, gives more information to what lies ahead for all of us to make this happen. We got lucky in Santa Rosa. The city council voted to spend some money to do a general plan amendment. So that gets back to what I was talking about before. It is a plan that tells everybody what's to happen with the property. And this is the process we're going through right now. So what happened is in July, the city hired a consultant out of Berkeley, and this was their job. Come up with land use concept, do the zoning, and do an EIR. An EIR is actually a very broad scientific study that tells you a little bit about what the property's there. The fact that there are creeks there, that some of them are underground, that they're above ground, what all the crossings are. They're not going to do a lot of detailed scientific work on it, like soil studies and things like that. That'll happen at a later date. But that is what they are mandated to do. Originally, it was supposed to be finished in June, but as I mentioned before, sometimes when you're working with bureaucracies, the timing on things is a little bit slower than if you were just sort of a group of people deciding to do something on your own. So it is one of the things that we cannot do before we move forward on this and find out what the value is you have to know what's going to be on the property. For example, if they were going to build 400 houses on this property, the value of the land would be very different than if it's open space and everything else in between there. Those are the two extremes of what could happen with the property. So this consulting firm is working hard right now to determine those uses. They had a big meeting at Montgomery High last August. They had another one in October. They presented their findings to the Planning Commission and City Council in November. And they were supposed to come back in January with an updated plan, but that's been postponed till March. And that's one of the reasons why I'd like you guys to sign our website or sign up so that we can tell you when that's going to happen. One of the things that you see in that little slide is that we like when anything of ours comes up on the City Council agenda, we kind of pack the room. We all wear our Greenway t-shirts that you can see there, and we have at least 3 or 4 people take cards. They're called speaker cards. And anytime you're at City Hall, you're allowed to speak for 3 minutes on a topic. It can be something they're discussing or something that you want to talk about. And so just to let you know that from a civic engagement point, any one of you can get up and speak during that period of time. But when it's our turn, we always make sure we've got lots of people there. And we put the t-shirts on so that the city council sitting there looks out and they know that the supporters are there listening to them, watching how they vote, and we'll let them know about it afterwards. We have been very, very lucky. Every time we've gone before City Council or the Board of Supervisors, we have had unanimous yes votes on everything that's come before them. Because by and large, the governmental officials really like this project. They see it as an asset for not only the city, but the county as well, and visitors. So once we have a broad zoning on this, we're hiring appraisers. They're going to tell us how much the property is worth. Then we begin negotiations with Caltrans, and that's what Sonoma Land Trust is going to do for us, representing us. And at the same time, we're going to do a kickoff for fundraising. We were very lucky last October. We got a $1 million grant from the Sonoma County Open Space District. And this was a really big deal for us because it gave us the seed money to go out and get other grants and to go get donors who will say, okay, this, once again, you need reinforcement that this is really going to happen. So that was very exciting, and we haven't worked out our fundraising plan yet, but that'll happen in the next 6 months. This is a little bit of a challenging thing to read. I would have liked to have blown it up better, but I couldn't. This is what the consultants have come up with as an alternative plan design. It's not their final one. The final one is sitting down at City Hall right now, but we're not allowed to see it until the public gets to see it. So, but what you see down here in this big triangle is that big mound of dirt at Farmers Lane. And the idea is to do building high density in that area. It could be housing, it could be commercial, it could be a hotel. We've heard all three of those things, and it may be a combination. But that, again, is going to determine the value of that piece of land. If you look over on the other side by Summerfield, where that blue line is, that's the creek, you will notice that that's all green. The only thing on that part of it is going to be bicycle paths, that's all. And then the rest of it in between, from Summerfield down to Franquette, is where lots more is going to happen. That's the flatlands. So that's where the picnic areas can be, that's where the play areas can be, that's where active recreation will be. Once again, that ribbon of the dotted line you see there, the bicycle paths, that will traverse the whole thing. But what happens here is really kind of interesting, because right now the consultants have to figure out what's going to be on the property. But I always challenge everybody and say, this is not going to get built the day you buy it. This is going to get built little by little over a period of 20 and 30 years. So this is not only free, it's not for me, it's for you, it's for your kids, it definitely is going to be for your grandkids. So the challenge is, what is Santa Rosa going to need in 20 and 30 years? Are our smartphones going to look and be the same? Is transportation going to be the same? You know, right now, Uber and Lyft are changing transportation to a degree. Are they still going to be around? Are we going to have driverless cars and buses that are going to pick us up from an app on our phones? It's so hard. Technology is changing so much right now that it's really hard to forecast. So when you make a plan like this, you want to put things in stone, but you also want some flexibility, because so much is happening and so much will happen that we can't even imagine. So one of the curious things is, we know that we'll need some power for lighting and toilets and things like that on the property. Well, NASA is doing a study right now with a guy who actually lives here in Santa Rosa, and he has made these interlocking blocks that are pathways and actually roads, and they're actually solar collectors. And so it's possible that roads and paths can be built that will actually be providing us our energy. And so once again, it's really hard to project out into the future, and that's the challenge of this whole design. But I will just say to you that there will be a 45-day public comment period that's probably going to happen over the summer, where all of you can give comments on what the final design is. I urge all of you to do that. And if you, again, sign up on our website, we will notify you when that public comment period is. And that'll happen through the City of Santa Rosa website. So we want to, again, say thank you to the American Institute of Architects for this concept plan we have. UC Berkeley has a grad school of design, and they did a wonderful report for us in 2011. We got a grant from the National Park Service that helped us not only with that brochure that I hope you all have, but also in telling us of grants that other communities have received for funding. And they've also given us insight into other towns where they have greenways and told us how to do it and what are the best practices and what worked and what didn't work in other places. We have white papers that have been written by that group of advisors that I told you about, and they run the gamut everywhere from policemen and firemen on safety issues to biologists and urban street planners to give us insight into specific details when we need more information to present an argument to people of why we're advocating for something. The other thing that we cannot say enough about is the running community and the cycling community. Empire Runners in Santa Rosa, the Santa Rosa Cycling Club, and the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition have been incredibly supportive of us for years now, giving us money and giving us advice. And without them, we wouldn't have half the information and knowledge that was so necessary to pull this off. So, one of the things that we would like you to do is join us for a hike sometime. Obviously, we're not doing it in February and March. We kind of do it in April, May, and September and October, when we know there won't be any rain. We don't go on the property itself. It's an urban walk, but being on the property gives you an idea of just what's there and what can be in the potential. We post those on our website, the dates, and we don't have any yet. There's the website address. It's also on our brochure. When I say help with outreach, one of the things that I can ask you to do is go home tonight and tell somebody in your family or one of your roommates or one of your friends about this idea, and let people know. What we have decided to do this year as a mandate is to really broaden our outreach to as many people as possible. And so that's one of our goals. If you are motivated, we have something called Action Alert. Right now we have about 250 people on that list. And those are people who will put their t-shirts on and show up at City Hall, or they will send an email or a letter to somebody in the city or the county or anybody else we do. In other words, there are core supporters who rise to the occasion and do something when we need some support and some help. So that's something else you can sign up on our website. And if any of you are interested in volunteering, we always do tabling at things like the Grand Fondo or the Earth Day fair downtown. And it's kind of fun to do that. You meet lots of people, and you're always with other tablers who are really like-minded people having a good time too. On the lower right-hand side, you see one of the things that we just did recently for our Action Alert. This came, again, to those people who specifically signed up for that. And all it said was, show up at City Council, the date and the time. And we always give a reason why, but this is what Action Alert means. So, here we are in Santa Rosa and Sonoma County. And I think you can see how this greenway fits into the whole picture of this beautiful place that we live. So, thank you.
Okay, so we definitely have some time for questions.
Good.
And as a reminder,
Yes.
question.
Okay. Yes.
My question is, since Caltrans does not build the freeway, why can't they donate the land to you? I mean, that's would be the obvious thing to do, right?
Yes, and I thought they should give it to us for $1. The question is, why shouldn't Caltrans give us this property? It's actually a very good question because taxpayer money was used originally to buy that land. So now taxpayer and private property and private donations are being used to buy it back again, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But sometimes that's the way government works. And Caltrans has a mandate. When they have surplus property, they need to get what they call fair market value for it. That is in the state statute. That is a law. And so the only way anything like that would be changed is if our representatives at the state were able to have some impact. We tried to do this a couple of years ago when Noreen Evans was in Sacramento. She submitted a bill, and it went through her committee very easily, but when it got to appropriations, which is the money committee, Caltrans said, oh, well, that property is worth up to $27 million, and that was a number they just pulled out of the hat. And so the appropriations committee said, well, if we just give you this property, the state will lose $27 million, and we can't do that. So it's an element of our negotiations, but we don't know where it will go. So, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where would water, like, for the plants that you'd be planting, and also I assume that there would be water stations for bicyclists and walkers and stuff, so where would the water be coming from?
So one of the things, again, timing is everything. And one of the things that has happened is that the city has, and the water agency, have pipelines and pumping stations that are old. And you asked why is the county water agency involved in this? They want to put a new pipeline on this property because they have a 40-year-old pipeline that runs under Sonoma Ave. And I don't know how many people know this, but we are on an earthquake fault. And should there ever be an earthquake strong enough, that would not survive. So they need a backup, good, strong, modern pipeline that would survive an earthquake. And what makes more sense than to put it on a piece of property where there's no housing, they don't have to tear up any roads. So that's part of it. The other part is that the city has old pumping stations. You might not know it, but there's two big ones on Farmers Lane. Those two are old. They want new ones. There is one well that the city already dug on this property. They want to put at least one more on and maybe two. So what we're talking to the city water agency about is, gee, when you put those lines in, how about siphoning it off while you're building the whole thing, and we can have the water stations, have the toilet flushing, and have water for community gardens. And so it's perfect timing because of their interest in the fact that we will be able to provide these things with very little extra cost. Yeah.
Do you have any plan for safe crossing of the roads that divide up the sections of the park? Because if you're going to have a kids path, you're going to have little kids on there, obviously, you need something safe for them to get across the roads.
I would say that that is one of the biggest, oh, I'm sorry, forgetting to do that. The question was, what about the street crossings? And one of the things that is a challenge for the city traffic department is to do a design on this. And because Hohen Avenue is close to the Greenway, the crossings have to be as far away from Hohen as possible. So all the crossings are going to be on the north side of the Greenway. Some of them may be those little flashing lights that you see in the road where you press a button and they flash. There are other ideas that, that the City Roads Department is thinking about right now, but they will come up with a design for the crossings that will get put into this general plan amendment. One of the original ideas that actually came from the UC students was to build a bridge, especially over Summerfield. It's so expensive that at this point in time, that design is not on the table, but that's not to say that it couldn't happen in the future. Yes?
Obviously, safety is a big concern, but what is the plan for security, the people's safety when they're on the pathway?
Thank you. The question was, how do we deal with the safety issues on the Greenway? People frequently compare this Greenway with the Joe Rodota Trail, and I will just mention right now that they're kind of comparing apples to oranges in one respect. And that is that because the Joe Rodota follows a creek, the terrain of that property makes visibility a little bit hard because the creek is down low, the houses are up high, there's a lot of vegetation around there, and visibility isn't very good. The difference here is that the flatlands are really, really flat. And so you can see across it. The homeless problem in that area right now is like zero because people can see. There's one really old guy, nice guy who lives right near the high school, and he has his little kitchen set up there, and every time he sees anybody coming, he goes away quickly. We think that the best way, from best practices around the country again, is to have as many people using this property all the time. Eyes on the Greenway, whether they're people who live on the Greenway, and if you live on the Greenway, you're going to reorient yourself so that the windows are facing that way, the doors are facing that way, you can walk out on the Greenway. In most parts of the country, it has been an asset to the people who live around that area, and it compels people, because you're looking out the window, you're looking at the hills, you're looking at the Greenway, you see things that are going on. The other thing is we want to make sure that we've got solar in there so that we've got good lighting everywhere. So it's mostly lighting and vegetation and having people respond quickly. We also know that having community gardens is a great way to have people there all the time because they're tending their garden, they're watering, they're coming out at 10 o'clock at night picking snails off their vegetables and things like that. So once again, having a lot of mixed uses on the property help that. Yeah.
Do you think the Greenway would close at night?
This will be interesting because the city is going to control the Flatland Park and Regional Parks is going to close the part from Summerfield up the hill. Right now, Regional Parks is open all the time and City Parks closes dusk to dawn. So this is something that the two of them are going to work out. One of the things that we know is that you cannot lock that greenway. It's too big, it's too long, and it's really not possible to have a locked park like that. And that's the unfortunate thing with that neighborhood right now, is that the schools frequently lock their playgrounds at night, and on weekends too. So, no, I don't think it'll be a locked park. Yeah, anything, yes?
How is the parking going to be? So if people from other parts of the city are going to get there, are they going to have to park across the street, or is there going to be lots provided?
So parking, the question is, what are people going to do who drive to the Greenway? And one thing that we think is something that we are going to have a partnership with is Montgomery High School and the Friedman Center, which is up closer to Summerfield, and across the street, across the Greenway from on Hohen and Summerfield is a big medical building. There are 3 very big parking lots there that are virtually empty on the weekends, except when there's a football game or something like that at Montgomery High. But those parking lots are there and they are underutilized, especially on weekends and at night. And so what we'd like to do is to have a shared parking relationship with those people so that we don't have to take very much space for parking on the Greenway. Also on Farmers Lane, there is a new paint store that just opened up right next to the Greenway, Sherwin-Williams, I think it is. And right behind that is this funky little parking lot that hasn't been used in years. It's owned by the city. So that probably could hold about 20 or 30 cars in it as well. Okay, yes?
As you mentioned the solar pathway installation the gentleman said is developing that for NASA. Is it possible that for installations along the Greenway, as far as art or technology is considered, would you, I know that the pathway can't be paved with those tiles, but would it be considered to put an installation of those tiles to show what they're capable of, or to use them as an art installation?
The question is about the solar technology and what can we utilize to illustrate? I think that's your question, right? The NASA program right now is in its infancy, and I have no idea. They're doing an installation in Idaho, and I don't know the timeline on that. One of the things that I think is going to be critical is that we have solar sourcing of energy somewhere on the property. And whether it is covered areas in the little parking area that the city owns right now, whether it can be integrated into other things that are going to be on the Greenway, that will be determined. Solar panels are becoming smaller and smaller all the time, and they're being installed in so many different places that I think that there will be opportunities. Again, going forward, it's looking out 10 years, 20 years, how is the technology going to help us get what we want on this land? I think it's critical. Yeah. Both of them.
Sorry, what are the common arguments against this project?
I would say that there are some people who feel like this should be all housing. They are in a minority because this area is impacted with housing on the flatlands already. And when we started out 9 years ago, we didn't have this housing crisis that we have right now. So we have sort of evolved ourselves in thinking about this and saying, how can we have a compromise here? How can we take some of this land, have housing, but still keep it an amenity for everybody? Because if they're going to build housing on here, we know they're going to build high-density housing. and the more units you can get in a smaller footprint, the better. So what we want to do with housing is to consolidate it and give people living in that housing open spaces for themselves. Housing is probably, if you look at what people are concerned about, I think right now that is the most important thing, yeah.
So personally, it's important to me to actually protect the environment that is already there. Is there, a lot of people that share that thing?
The question was, how can we maintain the environment and protect it? And I would have to say that is the core value. Our mission statement says that we want a sustainable environment here. We have always talked about creek restoration, about getting rid of invasive plants, about helping with climate change, and that is the core. So everything we're going to do, whether it's building pathways or planting things, we want it to be natural and native as possible. And even with the bike paths, we have to be ADA compliant for sure, and so that requires a solid asphalt area, but we don't, the rest of it, we actually prefer to be permeable surfaces if that's possible, because we want to also, if we can do recharge on the property and collect this water and save it, that's another attribute for this property.
Okay, so I'm sort of having a hard time wrapping my mind around the time frame on this.
Yes.
So once, like, it sounds like about a year or two until they find out the value of the whole property, and then they come and tell you that, and then you try to raise the money to purchase the property, and then it's yours. How does that work?
Okay, so she wants to know what the timeline is on the Greenway. So first of all, what's going to happen is this general plan amendment will be finished in the fall. At the same time, as soon as we get the information, we're going to have the appraisers begin to work, because some of these things are going to happen in tandem and they'll overlap. We're not going to wait for one thing to end and then start the next thing. And so that's why over the summer and the fall, there will be appraisals done. At the same time, in the fall, when the appraisals are happening and we have a rough idea of how much the land costs, then we're going to start building this plan for how we're going to raise the money. And so all of that is going to happen probably in the next year and a half, maybe 2 years. We may not have all the money at that point in time, but at that time there will be a negotiated price within the next 2 years, and Caltrans has given us 5 years to raise the money. If we don't raise all of the money by that time, they will lend us the money. We prefer not to do that because obviously we're going to have to pay interest on it. So we prefer to get all the acquisition money we can up front and do that. As soon as those things happen and we have a payment plan and we have, even if it's a large down payment, the title will get transferred from Caltrans to 2 entities. The part from Summerfield to the park goes to the water agency, and the rest of it, the flatlands part, goes to the city, and those 2 entities will own title to the property. And then we start building.
Okay.
We'll have a big party.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen when that happens.
Okay.
Yeah. Another question? Yes.
So I'm concerned about the actual preservation of the animal habitat, especially if you're looking at 24-hour lighting. Is that necessary to light it 24 hours a day? And I also wanted to say, why not emphasize non-flush toilets, the compost toilets that national parks already have, and lay down the permeable concrete so you don't need any asphalt. It is a flat surface that, a disabled person can walk on.
Do you want to volunteer with us?
This isn't natural enough for me by any means at all. I would not vote to preserve it unless it were more natural. You're talking a lot of construction. Let people experience the natural world,
We'll see. Anyway, what the question was, how can we protect the natural world and do it in the most sustainable way as possible? I think that just to take a few of the issues that you brought up, the compostable toilets, I think that will be a city issue with the utilities department. And again, some of these things aren't going to happen for 4 or 5 years, so the more advocacy we can have for these kinds of things, the better. When it comes to lighting, I would suggest that some of that at night is going to be very low key. And again, because we have strong advocates for this being an open space wildlife corridor, I cannot tell you how strongly those people feel. And if any of you know Steve Barnhart, he used to be a professor here at the JC. He is at least a US renowned, if not a world renowned botanist who has worked up at Pepperwood for years. He's one of those people who comes to our meetings every month, has written the white paper on native plantings, and he has guided us through this process to a great degree on maintaining a wildlife corridor. And so we want people to use this land, but we also, because it is in an urban area, but we also feel like there's sensitivity, especially because of these creeks who we really want to protect, and we feel like it's so important to do that. And so, does that answer some of your question?
But look at the permeable concrete, no
Yeah.
asphalt.
Okay, thank you. Another question? Okay, good. I want to thank you very much. I hope that you will at least visit our website if you don't sign up. There's a lot of good information there. And I just want to say to you too that 2 people started the process of not putting the bridge over Spring Lake. If those 2 people hadn't done that, we would not be here today. 6 people started this process, and that land right now wouldn't be saved for us to do something with. And so if you have an idea, just think it doesn't take very many people to make changes. And so I encourage all of you to do that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so a couple things for those students that are enrolled in the class. Just as a reminder, we meet in 2 weeks on the 22nd. Your write-up is due on that day. Anyone here from the public? We do have another presentation on March 1st. This one is about finding and following your passions. And Portia Sinyak, Zero Waste, No Recovery Life Initiative is going to be presenting. So,
I go back twice to every
Thank you.